Good day to you, good evening. And today we are entering into a little scientific discussion. And after that, as second part of my talk, some valuable advice for parents. So we are in quite a bit of excitement about the vaccines that have come around. So there's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Both are based on sending a piece of RNA of the COVID-19 virus to interact with the DNA RNA system of the host cells, that are our human cells, and then that is supposed to produce the spike protein of the virus. So our RNA will be induced by the external RNA to produce the spike protein of the virus, and to deliver that piece of RNA, nanomolecular technology is used by the Moderna, which is tied up with Gavi, and the Pfizer vaccine also uses the nanomolecular technique to deliver the piece of viral RNA into host cells, that is human cells, which will produce, so the viral RNA will induce our RNA to produce the viral protein. That has not happened before this. And there was one disaster when they tried to do a vaccine for the SARS CoV-1, and they used this technique to, a similar technique, in primates, in chimpanzees, and all the chimpanzees died. That's a different technique. So this is the first time that our RNA will be induced to produce the viral protein, the spike protein. Then the theory is that when that spike protein is produced in the human body, in the host cell, those who get the vaccine, then the host will produce antibodies to that spike protein of the virus. And then it will not prevent the virus infecting, but it will prevent the disease getting worse inside the people who are vaccinated. So they have drastically reduced the endpoint of preventing infection. Secondly, it's not sure whether those who get the vaccine will not transmit the infection to others. So there's doubt on it. As far as the Oxford vaccine goes, which is marketed by AstraZeneca, what they have done is they have used modified chimpanzee adenovirus to deliver this RNA piece into the human host, and then the same thing, the human host is supposed to produce the spike protein and also produce antibodies against the spike protein, which will reduce the severity of infection, not infection itself. Then there are other questions. When a foreign protein is introduced like that, there are neutralizing antibodies that will result in the organism being bound up and hopefully eliminated. But there are other antibodies called binding antibodies. So it is a known phenomenon which is called virus interference and antibody dependent enhancement. Then those binding antibodies bind up the spike proteins, and a severe cytokine storm reaction occurs. That is the immune reaction that makes the patient go bad. That is known. That is called ADE, antibody deficient enhancement. Now nobody can answer whether these vaccines will do the same thing, because in the past it has happened. Now I am Dr. Lalith Mendis from Colombo, Sri Lanka. My substantive post was as Head of Department Pharmacology in a state medical faculty. So when I speak on pharmacology, I speak on my primary training. And when I speak on immunology or virology, then I have to depend on fairly careful reading of experts, because of the COVID-19 issue, it has got very politicized. So there are politicized people who run the pandemic proposition, and there are eminent reputed scientists like Prof. Carl Heneghan of the Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, Tom Jefferson, same. And then Prof. Sunetra Gupta, Professor of Epidemiology, Oxford. Then Professor Dolores Cahill, who's an expert on medtech and biotech and immunology, who are bearing this view, and you can read them either on the CEBM website, Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. Then Professor Dolores Cahill, you can read her on the WDA, World Doctors Alliance website. Professor Sunetra Gupta, you can read her in the Great Barrington Declaration, as well as their present website, which is called Time for Recovery. So we are still on the vaccine issue. Why this vaccine issue is a vexing issue. Then to it is added the fact that this was the Oxford and Moderna haven't gone through phase 2, phase 3 trials. All they did was in a population that was where the infection was spreading, they gave the vaccine, and Oxford one actually gave, of those who contacted the disease, there were only 95 people who contacted, though it says 30,000 people were involved, of it only 95 contacted the disease. Of that 95, only 5 got the vaccine, and the other 90 got the placebo. So all they are claiming is that out of 5 people who got the vaccine, their clinical features were not as severe as the 90 who got the placebo. So you can understand that this is not a huge earth-shaking success, though it is made to do so. So we need to be careful that we also don't politicize. I don't politicize the issue. Obviously you will realize that when I am speaking like the scientists who are saying the PCR testing is only an epidemiological survey and it should not be used as a diagnostic test. So there is a reputed body of scientists, large number, who say that. And there's another group of scientists who are advising governments to do more and more random PCR testing and then trace and contact tracing. Then when PCR is positive, to do shutdown, quarantine, lockdown. Now those scientists are the ones who are advising the government. Now scientists like Professor Carl Hennigan of the Evidence-Based Center, they are furious that their voice is not heard, and why do only few scientists advise the government? And that gets compounded in UK, for instance. Professor Chris Whitty, Sir Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, who are the topmost scientists in the SAGE group, advising the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, are also quite heavily connected, easily found on Google or any other thing, with the vaccine industry and Big Pharma. So when they have pushed a vaccine, there's a story before the vaccine came. The story before the vaccine came, now one more thing about the Russian vaccine, they used a human adenovirus modified to do the same thing as Oxford has done, and they say it is effective. Now Oxford is only now doing extensive phase 3 trials. Moderna and Pfizer, who are asking for approval under emergency regulation, ERA, have not gone through phase 3 trials at all. As I said, only 95 people were actually got the infection and got the vaccine. So this is the problem. There another little medical fact you need to remember is that with vaccines, in our immune system, you have T cells and B cells. They are lymphocytes. So what the vaccine should do is to stimulate the T cells, which produces innate, adaptive, trained immunity in the host, in all of us. And then T cells will do the needful. But if a vaccine stimulates B cells more than T cells, you get a quick antibody spike, and those antibodies may be neutralizing antibodies or may be binding antibodies. If they are binding antibodies, you will get a cytokine storm reaction, and patients can die. And in fact, in the Oxford vaccine, a patient got transverse myelitis. So the issue is there when alien RNA, foreign RNA from outside is entering human host cells and getting our genome to produce foreign proteins, it is a new venture. So if the vaccines stimulate more B cells, then it would be a counterproductive act. So nothing of that has been clarified. Raw data are not available for examination, but there's a lot of fanfare among those who plan the infodemic, plan the pandemic, a lot of fanfare that the vaccine has now arrived. Then China has its own stance that they are convinced they have the best vaccine. Sinovac and Sinopharm both have claimed that, and they claim that they have gone through phase 1, 2, 3 trials, and WHO is quite aligned with China, and that's what WHO offers at present to countries like Sri Lanka. So all this, and then there are about 40 other vaccines being developed without clarifying the primary issue, and no one is offering that the infection will be prevented, and the duration of immunity is also not known. Whether you get 2 flu shots or 1 flu shot is not clarified. So all that is in the dark. Then the story before the vaccines came. How did the vaccine urgency come? Patients were not given, infected people were not given the hydroxychloroquine, zinc regime that has been proven over and over again effective with the Professor Diderot French studies, Michigan Henry Ford system studies, then Grossman New York University Medical College studies. So many studies have proven the effectivity of hydroxychloroquine and zinc in early treatment before people are hospitalized, right from home. Now in the Dr. Peter McCullough early treatment schedule, he is a cardiologist from Baylor University, Texas, and they were called Professor Harvey Risch, Professor of Epidemiology, Yale, Dr. Farid, and Dr. Peter McCullough was called to the Senate to give evidence on the early home treatment to be implemented. So they did give evidence. So this early treatment is not being given. That is why the death rates are high. So one has a reasonable suspicion that early available, cheap, effective, safe medicine was not given to make the pandemic look fatal and terrible. If early treatment is easily available and effective, then the issue of a vaccine does not come. For instance, in malaria, we do chemoprophylaxis with chloroquine. And we have eliminated malaria in our own country, Sri Lanka, and many other countries have eliminated malaria with chemoprophylaxis, that is giving a drug for prevention, and of course with vector control. So when a safe, effective combination like hydroxychloroquine and zinc are available, then there's no reason to panic that a vaccine has to be there. These vaccines have not tried out in their present trial situation the effect upon children, effect over 55s, vaccines have not tried that. Then from Australia, Professor Brody has also done long clinical trials and is saying ivermectin, a drug that is used for helminthic worm treatment, is also effective, and that it is also zinc iron 4, acting just like hydroxychloroquine, so that is also available. Then in early home treatment, you also give, now vitamin D is proven to be effective because it has a very needed action in the immune system. So vitamin D is both preventive and curative, and anyone should be taking a very large dose of vitamin D during this time. That would be safe prevention, and of course zinc as well. So if you want any particular details on this, please refer my timeline or the YouTube channels, or just send me a WhatsApp request on what you need to know on COVID science or digital science and the pharmacology, pathology of COVID and the vaccine situation to +94 77 49 59 214 is the WhatsApp number to which you can send some requests. Then we come to the PCR situation. That is a polymerase chain reaction, which is a piece of the virus DNA that may be present in an individual because of a previous exposure or a present infection. PCR cannot say whether it has been there for 1 year or whether it is immediate now infection. So the important thing is, if you do a random PCR testing in a population that was exposed to the coronavirus, then you are going to get a positive at 35 cycle threshold or above. And that same blood will be negative if the cycle threshold is less than 35. It's as random as that. So there is no basis to do any random PCR testing amongst the population. That's no science, that is nonsense. So, because PCR is not a diagnostic test, it is an epidemiological survey. So you get back to basics. So a doctor diagnoses COVID on the clinical infection because of the features of COVID. Then with a person who has clinical features of COVID comes out with PCR positive, it is probable that that clinical infection is because of COVID. Now, COVID clinical infection, what is very specific for COVID clinical infection is that when the virus works in the lung, the alveolar capillary membrane of the lung, that is to say, there is this the lung cell. So oxygen comes from outside the lung cell, and then the capillary is just adjacent to the lung cell. This is the capillary in my demonstration. This is the lung cell. So the interface is called the alveolar capillary membrane. So the oxygen comes from here. This is the lung cell. This is the capillary wall, and here is the blood. Now the oxygen has to get into the blood, and the carbon dioxide in the blood has to get back to the air, and you breathe in and out, and oxygen is brought in and carbon dioxide is taken out. Then people with COVID pathology have no problem with their ventilation. They can breathe in and out. Their problem is that when the COVID immunopathology is happening, the lung cell and the capillary membrane, there's an immune reaction here, and this gets thicker, and then capillary endothelium wall is damaged, lung cell is damaged, virus is multiplying here, and virus uses the S protein to get into the cell by attaching to the ACE2 receptor, and it uses an N protein and an M protein and an E protein to go from cell to cell. It's a diabolical virus. And the strange thing is, at the very beginning itself, 5 Indian scientists said it looks like a regular coronavirus, into which at a certain point called the Furore point, where an enzyme is used for genetic modulation, a part of the HIV virus had been fixed in a laboratory. That is the conclusion of Professor Luc Montagnier, who is the one who got the Nobel Prize for describing the HIV virus. In the Gilmore Health website, it is available. If you want the reference, I can send it to you. Please send a WhatsApp. So when the lung has this immunopathology, oxygen can't go inside, carbon dioxide cannot come outside. Then the patient behaves as if one who has climbed a high altitude without oxygen support, which is called high altitude disease. So Professor Sharif Sultan described this in March 2020 and recommended the regime. So early home treatment should have hydroxychloroquine, should have zinc, should have vitamin D, and also should have low dose aspirin, because when the lung tissue is getting damaged like this, when the lung immunopathology of COVID is happening, blood begins to have microclotting, microthrombosis inside the capillary arterioles. That is prevented by low dose aspirin. If you wait for later, then you have to give dexamethasone, which is effective for that, and then you have to give also a blood thinner like heparin or enoxaparin or whatever. But what the patient should get moment he gets cough and is trying to go blue is oxygen 100% with a CPAP. CPAP is a mechanism by which patient can easily breathe in. those people should never be intubated. So most of the deaths at the beginning were because of wrong intubation, trying to ventilate people who can breathe anyway. Their problem is not ventilation. They can easily do that. Their problem is, though the air goes in, air can't go through the lung and into the capillary, into the blood. Carbon dioxide accumulates inside and oxygen does not go through. That's the problem. So without treating this effectively and early, deaths were allowed to happen. Now they are diabolical. To this day, UK does not use early treatment at all. In United States, frontline doctors have fought the battle, gone to court also, and they have in different places, they prescribe hydroxychloroquine and the early home treatment schedule so that hospitalizations are prevented, deaths are prevented. And in Sri Lanka, we treat all hospitalized patients with hydroxychloroquine, and now they are treating with low dose aspirin also. And in India they do the same thing. They sent the Indian Council of Medical Research. They are not intimidated by Western science. Indians, they are quite independent, and they have done their own science and found that, and they give home pack of medicine, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, vitamin D and low dose aspirin for people who are infected, so that they don't even have to go to hospital, they get healed. The issue clarifies outside. Nonetheless, COVID deaths will happen, can happen in people who are immunocompromised, obese, BMI is high, the basal metabolic index ratio is high, hypertension, cancer, kidney disease, in other ways immunocompromised. They are the ones who are susceptible to death. Then the rate of death for those under the age of 70 is 1 in 300,000. It is so low. I repeat, for those who are under the age of 70, rate of case fatality rate is about 1 in 300,000. So it is for this that they want to make a global vaccine. So China has recently suggested the QR code, that is, everybody has to get the vaccine, and before air travel will happen, QR code will be tested. So this is at this point that issue comes that there will be a digital certificate inserted into the right wrist or wherever, and it is at this point the issue becomes strange, because this Christian's book, the Bible, it says in its last chapter, a time will come that people, a certain global controller, he is called the beast, the certain global controller, a very powerful political personality perhaps, will try to, or it may be a political plus economic personality, will insist that people will be marked with a mark. So QR code is a mark where your identity will be known, all kinds of data will be ferreted out on the pretext of that you have been vaccinated for this strain and that strain and the Italian strain and the D614 strain and D614G strain and 614G strain, and now there's an EU strain also. So recently, in fact day before yesterday, UCLA has done a research and they are saying these strains were there from the beginning, they are not mutations. So that's another whole lot of another angle of argumentation. So there are universities like North Carolina, North Virginia, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Yale, and now UCLA, who have done non-politicized research. At the same time, you get Lancet and the Oxford Recovery Trial, the WHO Solidarity Trial, who did politicized research to criminalize hydroxychloroquine. So when we speak about politicized research, we have to be very careful that our opinion is not politicized but based on science. So that's what science has come to. Fake science, fake media, and politicians who have been bought up by the global regime, they are moving towards pandemic and shutdown. Now, in France, where hydroxychloroquine was first proved by an outstanding scientist, pharmacologist, Professor Didier Raoult, who is the director of the French National Institute of Infectious Disease, He is reputed for outstanding research, but when he came out with the simple truth that hydroxychloroquine is safe, cheap, effective for COVID-19, he immediately became a controversial figure. Then when Professor Sunetra Gupta, Professor of Epidemiology, Oxford, a reputed scholar, when she spoke against PCR testing and the way it is going, she was immediately criticized most vehemently. Then, of course, the real crux of the matter came in Switzerland. Now, Johns Hopkins has a thing called the wordometer, where they monitor new cases and deaths per day world over in the countries who have agreed to this. So they monitor, and they monitored all countries, and in Switzerland, what they found was between up to the 27th of May 2020, their case fatality rate was about 1.5%. So for every new case, you understand, it is the daily death over daily new cases. That's the NCFR is like that. So in that, on the 27th of May, when Lancet published their article condemning hydroxychloroquine, later that article was found to be fraudulent, full of errors, and how on earth a reputed journal like Lancet came to publish it, no one knows. By unknown people who just grabbed data and rehashed it, and Lancet ran it as a major article, and Lancet has to retract it. When a reputed academic journal has to retract an article, a major article like that, nobody can trust the science of that medical journal thereafter. And the plot thickens when you know that the Lancet editor is a frequent visitor to China, and he's on China primetime television, and increasingly Lancet has been taking socio-political issues like politics in Kashmir, politics in Palestine. Lancet has political issues, so it has got politicized. Lancet also published the Oxford Recovery Trial, which also was full of holes. Yes. So then getting back to Switzerland, Switzerland stopped giving hydroxychloroquine on the 27th of May. What happened? In 10 days' time, the case fatality rate daily went up 10 to 13 times more. I can produce the graph. And then when they started giving hydroxychloroquine again on the 7th of June, in 10 days' time, case fatality rate, which went up like that, came down back to earlier levels. Indisputable proof that hydroxychloroquine works. That's the point at which Yale professor of epidemiology, Professor Harvey Risch, entered this argument and said, what is the meaning of this when there's such epidemiological proof that hydroxychloroquine is effective? Why are we not giving hydroxychloroquine? You know what happened? He's a Google scholar, 47 much publicized, much referred articles to his credit, famous epidemiologist. They pounced on him and hamashed him, and Trump touted drug and all kinds of things. Thankfully, 20 Yale academics came forward and said, why are you criticizing our colleague? He's a man of integrity, high academic reputation. He has spoken science. So they defended the colleague. So that's how severe the political battle is to criminalize easily available drugs and get the vaccine on. So this is the vaccine battle. That's a lot that I want to speak to you about the vaccine, I think. I hope I have covered. If you have any questions, please send me a WhatsApp question. Then in my next talk, I can take it up. This is the 120th talk I am doing. And on COVID science, digital science, happy hour, brain bright, different topics. These are my scientific talks. I also have spiritual talks, which I have not numbered, but this is my 120th on this list of talks on these scientific matters. I think I have covered generally a few other things Antibody treatment is available, but antibody treatment cannot be given to everybody. It's very expensive. Each trial has suggested beta interferon to be inhaled, which is effective. Now there's a new trial going on to inhale steroids like the way you inhale for asthma, because as I explained to you, the COVID-19 problem is in the lung at the interface of the alveolar capillary membrane. It's an immunopathology of the lung. Then of course COVID may be in some people, depending on the presence of ACE2 receptor, there may be effects in the brain, effects in the heart, and of course I already explained to you, when this microthrombosis is happening, blood begins to clot inside the lung capillaries, and then when carbon dioxide is rising, this COVID protein also has an effect to break up the hemoglobin. Then the heme molecule increases in the blood, and then that causes more clotting happening in other organs also. So people can die of unnecessary clotting. It is called disseminated intravascular coagulation of other organs, and people can die. And of course they can similarly die of clots in the brain or clots in the heart. But as I said, under the age of 70, the fatality rate is 1 in 300,000 cases. Then few children have also evinced the Kawasaki syndrome, which is an immunological problem with the small arteries, so their extremities got reddish and so on. That has also been described. So the death rates were higher in the temperate belt where they take flu shots. So it is known the RNA vaccine shots like the influenza flu shot predisposes people to react to other virus engagements severely overmuch. So that's a known fact. That's called virus interference, because the viral protein and our antibodies, our binding antibodies, that is called antibody dependent enhancement of a cytokine storm, immune inflammatory reaction. As I said at the beginning, there's reasonable question raised whether these vaccines will cause that kind of problem. So now let me get to my second part of the talk today, appeal to parents, and let me take a little drink before that. 1. Dear parent, comparison or competition is not healthy. Every child is a star, having his own radiance in the firmament of their excellence. So you need to know that when God did it, He made 70% verbal processing kids and 30% pictorial processing kids. That's how it was before the digital explosion came. Then the effect of the pixel screen, I have researched much on it, written much on it. Effect of the pixel screen is to push children to be more and more pictorial, because please check on my number 118 clip. I have done an extensive talk on digital science of the science of the pixel screen on a child's career, child's curriculum, career, character and choices, on his curriculum, on his character, on his choices and on his career. You have to listen to that. I'm not going to do too much of this now. I'm now only making an appeal to the parents. So if you put the child on the pixel screen, the child shifts towards becoming kinesthetic, pictorial, visual and acoustic. So they want more music, more jazzy music, that will make them more kinesthetic. Then they can't sit in one place and study, and that becomes attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Unfortunately, many parents, without giving them time to engage and to bond, they run to doctors, and then you get treated with methylphenidate. Now I have done research on this, I am published on this. So we are now saying get to empathic learning therapy and get to empathic motor therapy on this. So that's the appeal to parents. So don't compare. The competition must not increase. Complement the children. This generation does not like calibration. They don't like to face up to tests. They don't like plan and management, because their brain has got wired like that, because you allow the pixel screen from early days. I have done this before. 5 laws of digital, 5 laws for the pixel screen. Never give the pixel screen before the age of 3. Please don't. Never give it during feed times. You develop a unbreakable habit in the child if you do. Secondly, parents will factor in and protect your child from devious influences that come the pixel screen, pornography, risk, peril, fight, fright, flight mode, just jump and see. So they shift from top-down regulation of the prefrontal cortex to bottom-up regulation via the amygdala. Just see and do, just jump and see. That kind of acceleration and hyperkinesia comes into them. 3. Parents must give time and not gadgets. And then you must take time for mistake management. These children like to do risk, experiment, ask questions. You must have time for all that. And when they do a mistake, that's the time to come in to manage the mistake. Now, to manage mistake, we have a principle of the cross that the Good Shepherd gave his life, and he absorbs our error and absolves us. That's the modus that dad must practice. Mother makes it daily safe. Dad who gives next stretch and next step, and dad who gives the boundary control and the boundary management. So when a son or daughter breaks the boundary, that is dad business. You can't say mother must manage it. So this is the mistake management on the basis Good Shepherd gave his life for us, and Good Shepherd corrects the error. So it's not retributive justice, I'll hit you. No, they'll remember the wrong thing. You must lead them into redemptive justice, that they must not repeat it, but by you coaching them the right way. You can't command this generation. They are ready for a fight, and if you take a stick, they will say, so you want to hit me? Hit. They will say like that. Also, that's not a good proposition to put a child into. So dad, you really need training. Yes, you can't just leave it to mom. Most dads like to be there in the limelight, and when he's winning the first prize, you want to be there to take the trophy, run your race through your son or daughter, and mother, flack comes on mother to get it right when it goes wrong. No, dad, you have to get it right when it goes wrong. That's a precious investment time. So I always say, please recover your 7 p.m. for son and daughter, because you are training future citizens. You have to train them. School is next, work is third, but first home for future citizen retraining. 4. Parents must clarify their ambitions for children, what is doable and what is not. Now this generation gets pulled by sci-fi, magic, spook into the imagination, and most of that imagination they can't do. As a medical principle, what child imagines in a day, 50% must be doable. Similarly, their last thrill or last pain is pushing them from behind. So they get pushed from behind, drawn from front. They hardly live in the present. This is their problem. So we have to capture their present. To capture their present, we have to be with them in the present. If not, they'll more and more go online. At this time, especially with online classes, we must desperately fight hard to get our schools back into order. So you take these 4 priorities: family health, family finances, children's education, and of course your ultimate destiny and God's scope, which you need to fulfill in your lifetime. 5thly, parents will discern between what's best for their child and the striving of their own heart for child's advancement. So there's a competition that comes. Parents want to run the races in their children, pushing them for sports and whatnot. That doesn't work well. You have to live for them. That's the principle. Parents lay down their life for children, and children's time will come in gratitude to return to parents when they have to care for their parents. Point number 6. Parents will stretch children only to what children can bear. You must not stretch them beyond. Your child's elasticity can break. Stretch them to the doable. Some are high performers, some are small performers. Then some are performers in the things that are kinesthetic, like entertainment, hospitality. They have to do things with their hand and imagination and, nice color and art and things like that. Those were called right brain those days. And the management kind was called left brain. It is a rough. It's a misnomer, but it works okay. So know the type of the child so that you can handle them properly. 7. Parents must count the cost on children, the wear and tear if you keep pushing them into studies, sports, elocution, music, all at the same time. So there's a good gift in them that God has given. Your stewardship is to complete what they have, not to interject what they don't have. So you have to take care of that. 8. Parents must not run their races through children. 9. Parents must not push children to be independent. Because there's a big slogan saying you must do your own thing. No. Particularly recover the night hour when they are falling asleep. GABA works, gamma-aminobenzoic acid, gamma-aminobutyric acid works. That's the time they get tender. So learn the habit of getting by their bedside, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. You are giving them, you remember? And that's the investment you make for their life. And they are falling asleep. Mea culpa comes, that went wrong. That's the time they like to do confession. So that you give them a good night time, 9 hours of wonderful sleep, of brain healthy habits. There's a real brain program that goes on, which I think is a God program, to get the toxicity out, and dreams are part of it. So they must keep their dreams, actual dreams that they see. NREM sleep, no dream time. REM sleep, dream time, 3 to 4 cycles between 1 o'clock and 4 in the morning. For that, they must not do digital activity in the last 2 hours before sleep. So in British dormitory schools, they are not allowed to take the digital gadget into their dorm. High-end schools where they pay as part of the contract. So finally, what I have to say is, parents must not be enamored by their child's glory. Every child is a star. That's the slogan of our Colombo Empathic Learning Center. You must think of the child's long-term health, personality, character, spirituality. So the child's curriculum, child's character, child's choices, and child's career. That's what parents can ask. Keep the God scope, what the child is best at. That's parental stewardship. Thank you for listening. We'll meet again when some more facts come on the COVID side.